All right, it's about 11:25. What I'd like you to do, if you get a chance, you don't have to do it this second, but you might want to write this down. There is a site out there, no pun intended, it's called sitepoint.com. And they publish books, they have tutorials, they have a whole bunch of stuff out there. The reason that I'm telling you about this is they're having these screencasts for the next 26 days. It's called CSS A to Z. And the last one that they've had in there is all on the box model. All right, now it's, and you say, well, geez, I don't have time to watch that. It's 3 minutes and 42 seconds. It's not going to take a lot of time out of your life. All right? And I'll let you write that down if you want to. And the other one that you might want to write down is what they reference in here is this second site that's right here. It's called guyroutledge.github.io, and I want to show you that one in just a second. All right, so I'll just leave those up there for just a minute. And the guy just kind of walks you through some of the basics with the box model. And are there questions on the test regarding the box model? Yeah, but not really very much, but it's an important concept. It's important that you all understand what the box model is. And that's kind of what he talks about in here in 4 minutes. All right. Now, what I want to show you, I'm not going to go into anything from this screencast, but I want to show you the other one. This is even a better demo than the one that I'd shown you, because what he's got here is he's got an interactive box demo. Now watch what happens. If I change the width, pretty obvious what's going on there. If I change the height, same kind of thing. But you can really see if I add top padding, what happens. If I add right padding or bottom padding, what happens. So you can really see that stuff from what's going on in here. This is even better than the interactive demo that I'd shown you earlier. I just got sent this morning, so I'm sharing it with you right now. And like I said, if you say, well, I don't care, that's fine. Then you don't care. But like I said, I'm just trying to make this stuff available to you as it becomes available to me. All right? Okay, so with that said, again, those are the two URLs if you didn't get a chance to write them down. And what I want to do then is start to go over the review sheet. Now, just so you know, number 4, that's what it was supposed to say. I know that's a little hard to read. It's not real big. In fact, let me just grab that and make it bigger. That's what it was supposed to say. But the question got screwed up. That was on me. It was, Amin was nice enough to let me know that the question made absolutely no sense from the way it was written. All right, was that number 4? Or was it number 12?
That was 12.
All right, well, here's 12. What are this mean? What about this? So I don't even have a clue as to what that is then. All right, so I thought it was 4, so I removed it from both of them. That's real good. All right, so let's just take it from the top, and I will go back and look at the test and see what's there that I left off. All right, so question number 1, as you can see, is what's the difference between an ID and a class? There's 2 differences really between each one. IDs, you always show, so if I've got an ID called hello, it's got to be pound hello. If I've got a class that's called hello, it's got to be dot hello. Does that make sense to people? That an ID is delineated by a pound sign and a class is delineated by a period. Right? How many IDs, how many things on a page can use an ID? 1. IDs must be unique on each page. So there can be only one element on a page with that ID. If you want more than one element, then you use a class. Does that make sense to everyone? So if I wanted to, create a class, let's say that on a web page, I wanted several different things on a single page to be red and bold. All right? So then let's say that I called it, for some reason, color bold. Okay? And I said color, red, font weight, bold. And let's say that I decide that I want to put this 4 different places on the same web page. I'm going to want to use a class. Does that make sense? Sometimes, the things that people use for IDs are things like they might have an ID that's named header or one that's named footer if they know they're only going to have one header or one footer on a page. All right? If you think that there's even a chance in the future that you're going to have more than one of something, make it a class. Okay? And then you also should know that when you're actually using that, then I'd have to, for instance, if it was a paragraph, I'd have to say either ID equals hello, or I'd have to say class equals hello. Now, am I right in assuming that that makes sense to everyone? All right. All right, so, I just put that up there. This was my own answer, how the ID was delineated and how the class was delineated. So an ID only once, class as many times as you want to per page. Question number 2, what are the components of the box model? And if you remember, and I can bring it up from here too, that what you have, this is a real simple picture, but it's important. You have to know for the test, okay? I already told you about classes and IDs, but you have to know the components of the box model. So there's content, and outside of the content there's padding, and outside of the padding there's border, and outside of the border there's margin. So I don't care how you remember that, CPBM or MBPC, but you should know the order in which those are, and you also should have at least a little bit of an idea about what each of them are. So if I move this up a little, notice content is the actual content. So that's whatever it is you're trying to represent. Padding is the area around the content. Padding is transparent. You don't see it. All right? Border, that goes around the padding and the content. And margin, that's the outside of the border. Remember also, and I'm not saying so much for a test, but understand the difference between padding and margin. Padding is inside of the box itself. Margin is what's between the different boxes or the different things that are in boxes. Does that make sense? All right. So I just took this. This is right out of your book if you like this better. Any questions on those first 2? All right. Number 3, what are the 4 types of CSS positioning? They are static, relative, fixed, and absolute. Again, this is all out of your book. Static is also known as normal flow. So if you see a question in there that asks what the default is or whatever, it's normal flow, which means as you throw stuff up on a web page, It just is going to be positioned where you put it, okay? If it's fixed, I gave you that example that, you know, you sometimes see this kind of thing in spreadsheets. So you've got this big spreadsheet here. And you might have a heading up here, or a bunch of headings. And as you scroll down through the spreadsheet, the information that's in here moves as you move down, but the headings don't move. All right? So if you've got something that you want to remain fixed, and usually headings are a pretty good example, you make it fixed. As it says, the element does not, and that shouldn't be not more, it does not move when the web page is scrolled. All right? Relative. There is something on the test that says if you want it to move just a little bit as opposed to where it's positioned, it's relative. So it's relative to where it currently is. All right? And remember, we've talked about this. This isn't on the test, but I just want to make sure that I can put it in some context here. That when we talk fixed and we talk relative, again, this is not on the test. But I already mentioned to you that if you say, for example, 36 points or 36 pixels, those are fixed in size. Those are always that size. On the other hand, if you say 36%, or you say 36 M's, which would be as big as this board, so you wouldn't say something that big. But if you say percentages or M's, they're relative. So they're going to look different on a cell phone as opposed to on a 24-inch monitor for a desktop. All right? And then there's absolute. So if I want, for example, let's assume that on every one of my web pages, right there, not a logo, but I want something to print there, whatever it is, I can put it in there, I can put it in a fixed position, and it doesn't move. All right, number 4 is this, okay? It says, what does this mean? Well, first of all, I called it some class to make it simple, but since there's a period there, it's going to be a class. It's going to float to the left. It will have a margin all the way around because there's only one number there and it says margin. So it'll have a 30 pixel margin at the top, right, bottom, and left. All right. It will also have a border, and that border will be 3 pixels wide. It will be dashed, so it'll be, you know, not straight, you know, and it'll be red in color. Does that make sense? There is a question like that one on there, all right, that asks you what that all means. The default value for the border property, if you don't put a size in there, it actually defaults to 0. So if you don't put a number, like we looked at a number in the last one we just put there, if we had not put a number in there, you'd never see it because it's 0 pixels. That's why you need to put a number there, because again, the default value is 0. All right? Normal flow, I already mentioned this to you. So there is something about normal flow. I don't remember what it is on the test. It displays elements on a web page in the order they appear. It's the default. All right? Any questions on anything so far? What is unique about the margin property? Well, it's not just margins, padding too, but the margin property is always transparent. The background of the web page or element shows through it. It's margin. It's blank space, right? Whether it's something between two elements or inside of an element, it's blank space. So it's transparent. Yes. Yes. Yeah. But the question on the test was, I think it was about I don't know if that was the question, but I think that's the answer, is the margin property. I don't know if they mentioned padding or not. I really don't remember. What's the difference between float left or float right, and float right? Remember that this is my web page here, all right? And I want to put an image in there, and I want there to be text. If I float the image to the left, it's going to be over here. I'm sorry. If I float the image to the left, it's going to be over here. And if I float the image to the right, it's going to be over here. Does that make sense? All right? That's one of the things that you were supposed to get out of this particular assignment, was how to float things. All right? So as it says, you use float left to float the element on the left side of the container, and you use float right to float it on the right side of the container. What they call it container, you can call it container, you can call it box, you can call it whatever. Questions on that? Anything so far? All right. Number 9, there's a question there along these lines. What does this mean? Remember, it's like a clock. Top, right, bottom, left. 12, 3, 6, 9. So this example would say 10 pixels top margin, 20 pixels right margin, 40 pixels bottom margin, 30 pixels left margin. You should understand that. Remember, if you have just one number, it applies to everything. If you have just two numbers, the first number applies to the top and bottom, the second number applies to the left and the right. And you can set up margin like this, or you could have literally said margin dash top 10px. Then on the next line, margin, you could have done it like that. You see it done both ways. All right? Some people like to just put it in once and put a bunch of values in. Some people think it makes more sense to have 4 different attributes in there. Okay. Number 10, there are actually 2 different ways to clear floats. One is to say clear both, but you can also work with the overflow property. And if you say overflow auto, it will do the same thing. So either one of those will work. All right. Number 11. How do you create a comment in HTML? It's right there. How do you create a comment in CSS? It's right there. And those comments, so the delineators are less than, exclamation point, dash, dash, and it ends with dash, dash, greater than for an HTML comment. For a CSS comment, it's slash star, and it ends with a star slash. Especially that CSS one, remember that? That's the way you comment in most programming languages. As far as what you'll do in here, when you do C++ or C#, that's a way you can comment in C#, or you can do this. And these 2 ways that are shown right there, that's the same way you're going to comment in ASP.NET. That's the same way you're going to comment in Java. All right, so they don't change. All right, the next one I'll have to come back and tell you because I don't remember what it was. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. Okay, what are this mean? How about this? That should say, what does this mean? How about this? So you should start to understand this stuff. Let me erase this. I don't want to confuse you at all. Because there's a couple of questions. They aren't this question, but they're like this. Remember, this is called a descendant selector. This means give me all unordered lists that are inside of a nav. This means give me all anchor tags that are inside of an ID named hello. If I would, for example, in the second one, if I left off the pound hello, that would say give me all anchor tags, period. If I left off the nav in there, that would say give me all unordered lists, period. All right? And another thing, just get used to this. So let's say I've got an unordered list here. All right? And, so it's an unordered dot something, dot something, dot something, dot something, dot something. All right? If I want something to apply to the unordered list as a whole, I can do it like this. But quite often, what I'm going to want things to apply to is I'm going to want them to apply to those list items. Would you agree with that? So even more often than you see nav UL, you're going to see nav UL LI. That should make sense to you. This says apply this to any list items that are inside of an unordered list that are inside of a nav. You can go as many levels with this as you need to go. All right, as you're going through and doing this. Any questions on that one? All right, number 13. How do you clear a left float? How do you clear a right float? Clear left or clear right? Okay. So sometimes what you'll see in CSS is somebody will have in this dot, and they'll call it clear left, and they'll put in the actual clear colon left. Then they'll also have a dot clear right, and they'll put in there clear right. They may even have a dot clear both, where they'll put in a clear both. They might call it clear both, they might call it clear all, it doesn't matter. You get the idea. All right, number 14. What do the CSS pseudo classes link, visited, hover, and active mean? Again, I got them right out of the book. One of the ones that's mentioned in the book is focus, which is almost never used. But remember two things. Remember what each of these mean, and please look at the screen. Listen to me, but look at the screen. That's the order that they have to be in, because there's a question like that on there. So it's link, then visited, then hover, then active. Again, however you choose to remember that. So these pseudo classes only work with hyperlinks. You should know already, for a hyperlink, this one right here, you should know that by default that's blue and underlined. So unless you change it, that's the way it looks. You should also know with this one, that's purple and underlined, because that's one you've already clicked. This one, if I set it up, that means I take my mouse and I rest it over it. That's called hovering. When I take my mouse off, it goes away. So for instance, if I'd set this one to gray, it would look like this when I would click on it, and it would look like this when I get off of it. Does that make sense? All right. And active literally means when you're clicking it. You haven't let go yet. So you're doing, a click event, a mouse click event. That one's not used as often either. Typically, the one that we're used to working with, all right, is the not yet clicked and the visited. And I'm asking you this. It might even be a later one. How do I turn off the underline? Text decoration what? None. So it's text hyphen decoration colon none. That's how you turn off the underline. You'll see that. So that'll say A here, no class, no class or no ID, and it'll just say there text decoration none, which means turn it off for all hyperlinks. You should shoot for consistency on that. Most people find that they remove the underlines. The other thing too, we haven't really talked real much about this, but when you're writing web text, don't write a lot of text that where you underline things. I mean, literally manually underline them, because people click on that because they think it's a hyperlink. It happens all the time. Questions? Any of the first 14 here? All right, the number 15. What are the 4 possible values for the display property? Display none means make it invisible. Display none. Display inline, so if I've got 2 elements and I use display inline, it says display that one, then display that one. Put them on the same line. If I say display block and I've got 2 elements, it'll display the first one, then it'll display the second one underneath it. And there's a variant of this that's called display inline block. And display inline block, it says there will display it inline. That's just a very crummy definition, but it's the one that W3 Schools gives. All right. You're going to have to get used to some of this terminology. And it's not, again, it's not so much that you have to memorize it, but when you're starting to build your own pages, you're going to have to know how to set things up on the page. All right. Is that 15? Yep, 15. All right, 16. What are the possible values for list style type? For an unordered list, can be circle, okay? And a circle is the circle that's not colored in. So the circle looks like this. All right, the disc looks like this, but it's colored in. So it's the blackened circle. There's square, which is also colored in. And there's none, which means, or you can have a custom one, okay? For OL, it's decimal. That's the default, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Upper alpha, which means uppercase letters. Lower alpha, lowercase letters. Upper Roman case numerals. And lower Roman for lowercase Roman numerals. Questions on that one? All right, I want to just make sure we get through these because they're going to be coming in here in a minute or two. So, what are 5 new HTML elements? Header, footer, section, article, and aside. The header, typically you might put your nav bar in there, or you might put your logo, etc. in there. That's the header. Footer is typically at the bottom of either a document or at the bottom of a section. I want to tell you this. I haven't mentioned this to you before, and I don't want to confuse you. It is legal to have more than one header tag on a page. It is legal to have more than one footer tag on a page. If you've got a really complex page that's broken up into sections. The section is when you section a document. The article is an independent entry, and the aside is what's called a tangential or a supplemental entry. I gave you examples before of those. We talked about having a story in the paper where there's a plane crash. All right, or let's say that, I guess I saw it on the news the other night, that thing with Sully is coming out with Sullenberger, the guy who landed the plane on the water. So there might be an article here. Sully saves passengers up here. Then you might have an aside down here that's got Sully's life story type of an idea. All right, number 18, the universal selector, I guess that's the last one. It's the asterisk. So if you see that at the top of your CSS, that means apply it to everything. Any questions on any of these that we went over? Because we should be packing it up now because, like I said, they're going to be coming in here shortly. So when you come in here tomorrow, it will be test from 8 until a max of 9. The rest of the period will be in one more lab. All right? And then on Monday of next week, you're going to be testing the entire time that you're in here. We may, I don't know if we will or not. Oh, I'm supposed to ask, are there any of you in this room that in the past went to ITT? Anybody in here? Okay, that's fine. If you haven't heard, they're closing. ITT, the colleges are all closing, and they're trying to make it so that people who went there, if they're interested, they can come to Rankin. There's a woman who came in and talked to me yesterday, she may come in and sit in on class Tuesday. All right, and I told her that after I get done lecturing, I'll leave. She could ask you. She said, well, what kind of teacher is he? What are you learning? What are you not learning? Because I shouldn't be around when they ask questions like that, so I'll walk out if she does come. All right, that's it.